Welcome to the Global Tech Leaders Podcast, where we help business leaders and individual contributors with actionable insights to hit their number and figure out the nuances of truly operating a business globally today, squeezing the essence of the lessons learned from the planet's top tech leaders. This is your guide to joining the fast track to global market scaling.
Welcome, I'm Ross Lauder, your host from Single Focus Talent, and I'm joined by our non-exec director, John Quigley, today.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Today we are joined by Brendan Noud, co-founder and CEO at LearnUpon. Brendan founded the company over a decade, nearly at this stage, having had a decade of experience in this space, with a simple belief that a platform in the LMS and learning environment should be simple and quick to set up, which is also backed by exceptional 24/7 customer support today. They boast over 1,000 customers worldwide, with offices in the US, Australia, and 2 across Europe. They're an indigenous Irish company that are winners of multiple awards and just announced a significant funding round of $56 million. So really keen to understand what drives Brendan and where the organization is headed. So welcome to today's show, Brendan.
Thanks, Ross, and great to chat.
Well, look, we're looking forward to diving right in. So let's not hesitate. Maybe just take us through, what's brought you to where you are today? What were some of those inflection points, the learnings, the stages, and I suppose the decision trees I'm really curious on, and then we can dive into the product in more detail. So tell us about you, if you would, Brendan.
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from Kildare in Ireland, which is a bit just south of Dublin, and I've always been very interested in business throughout my career. Probably somewhat coming from my parents. They had their own restaurant in Carlow for over 34 years on the go now. So even as a young kid, myself and my younger brother and sister, we were wheeled in to play a role there, clean tables, wash dishes, eventually get promoted up to serving on the counter, which was where you wanted to get to in your career as a young lad working in a restaurant. And so that kind of entrepreneurial background in my parents, I think, definitely kind of handed down to me, and also to my brother and sister, who'd be kind of similar. My brother has his own landscape gardening business as well, and that business interest, I did BCom for college, so I just wanted to kind of get a kind of a general business background. I was just interested in all areas, and eventually I started my career in consultancy. Actually, I joined KPMG Consulting in the late 90s, and spent 5 years there. They eventually evolved into Bearing Point, and got a lot of experience with IT strategy and different strategy projects that they were working on, a lot of larger government projects as well, and really enjoyed my time there. I think it gives you a great grounding as a graduate coming out of college. You get great training and mentorship from people who have a lot of experience in consultancy for any of the kind of big 4, big 5 consultancy firms. And that I think my experience there, what I did find is after 5 years, I was starting to get a little bit of itchy feet and looking for something, the kind of larger projects that went on for 12 or 18 months. I used to find myself, I'd learn loads the first couple of months and then get a little bit bored, and I kind of wanted to move on to something else. So eventually that led me to moving on from KPMG to join WBT Systems, who were one of the first e-learning LMS companies globally, founded in the mid-90s. I joined them in 2004 and as a project manager, and really enjoyed. I ended up 8 years there, really enjoyed my time, where you had lots of projects on the go, and they were global, working with companies all over the world, like the World Bank, Valero Energy, Dow Chemical, etc. So really interesting companies. It helped combine my passion for traveling and seeing new places with my job, and I kind of evolved my time there. It's also actually where I met my co-founder in LearnUpon, Des Anderson. So Des is our CTO. And right from my first day in WBT, myself and Des hit it off and became good mates. We worked together in a lot of projects. I was project manager and he would have been solution architect. And so we got to travel on site, client site a lot, and kind of work hard. You always had a lot to do on those big LMS implementations. But also then when you had some downtime, we got to go out and enjoy ourselves and see cool places, go out and have pints and have the crack. And so that really enjoyed my time there. So myself and Des worked closely together over that period. I moved over that time from a project manager role into more account management, looking after some of the larger accounts. And there was a lot of ongoing customization and services work with those implementations. So I would have kind of played a role in helping to identify those new opportunities and new business and manage it through as well. And eventually I moved into sales. Initially, I used to support the sales team, kind of almost what today would be like a sales engineer role. But back then it was sort of, because I knew the product really well, I'd be brought in to help do the product demonstrations and kind of help map complex requirements through to WBT's platform. And really enjoyed that, really enjoyed the thrill of the sale and the chase. And it was often quite a long sales cycle, but big deals, large deals when you were successful. And I got a great buzz out of that and wanted to eventually move full-time into sales and became basically an account executive or sales rep and did that for my last 4 years in WBT. And I guess throughout that period, there was always the niggling at the back of my head of like really knowing the space quite well, that there might be an opportunity to build a cloud SaaS solution that was quicker to set up, easy to use, and as you mentioned at the start, great customer support. WBT was their platform was behind the firewall, kind of installed on servers. As I mentioned, very professional services driven, very kind of custom solution for each client, very powerful and worked great for very large organizations that had complex requirements. But for kind of the lower end of the market or smaller companies, that kind of solution wasn't going to work. It was too expensive, took too long to implement, and wasn't a fit. So through lots of chats in the pub and different things during our latter years in WBT, myself and Des, we eventually, and some made sweat equity co-founders of ours, we kind of talked about, could we go build a solution for the SMB market, and what might that look like? So that's kind of a little bit of background onto the early start of how we got about to founding LearnUpon.
So you mentioned a couple of interesting points there, and the niggle is something I can certainly relate to. I noticed that you've had a very admirable career in some very well-respected corporates, etc. And I think when we speak to CEOs, the common thread that we see on a regular basis is family business. It seems to be, it's the background that I come from myself in the chemical and pharmaceutical industry. And it's kind of this customer first to customer centric approach. I mean, my dad used to put it on the walls of his office, customer led, customer focused. And I'm curious, because what you've done is quite brave. We're a small island on the western fringe of the Atlantic, and or the eastern fringe, whatever way you want to look at it. And we're taking on the world. What kind of drove you to make that leap? And how did you know you would be successful, or did you know? And where did you see the major gaps? And what excites you about that space? If you could share.
So I suppose a few things. It's definitely it's a tough decision to make, because I had a very good job with WBT, and I did enjoy my role. And yeah, let's say got to travel a lot, well paid. But probably the niggles was maybe the ambition. I always felt that maybe there was a bigger opportunity there, and really wanted to go for that. And as well, like I always had my own thoughts on maybe how to structure the business, and like LearnUpon is the very opposite to WBT in many ways in terms of we're not services driven at all. We're pure SaaS solution. It's configurable, but there's no services work. But also how we grew the business, very marketing driven. So we invested heavily there in both content and paid marketing channels. And I always had thoughts about like how you would go about building that. And at some point, I think you kind of want to try these things and test yourself and see, can you deliver on it? I think I certainly seen, I suppose, again, back to the background with my parents, like seeing the chances they took in their careers sort of gives you that confidence that to go and have a go at it. probably in hindsight, looking back, I've always felt maybe I could have done it when I was a bit younger and had less commitments, like trying to do it when you have a mortgage and things like that definitely adds to the risk. The other side of that, though, is I had more experience, and that probably stood to me when you're trying to set out and start a business from scratch. It's so there's a bit of a trade-off there between, like, at what point in your career do you take that jump? So that was it. I think, like, in terms of, we always felt there was a big demand in the end. Like, it's a huge area. Like the TAM, the market for e-learning and learning management systems is huge. There's lots of players there. It wasn't like, I suppose, starting a business where to be a land grab, first mover, like, let's go out and raise tons of money and try and get this space. It wasn't a new category. We did come at it from the perspective of, okay, there's hundreds of solutions out there, but they have limitations. The support is notoriously poor across the space. The products are really complex. You have to go on days of training to learn how to use them. The time frame to see that ROI is very, very slow. So all of those kind of things were like, okay, let's, I think someone used the phrase to me once when I was talking to them about the early days of LearnUpon, that you're just trying to build a better mousetrap. And to some degree, I think that's pretty true, like, what we wanted to do.
So Brendan, I've so many questions to ask you, but I'm in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, do you worry about getting too clunky and over engineering your solutions? Kind of like, the LMS systems that in your earlier career that you were responsible for selling and implementing and kind of project managing. And what jumps into my mind is like the anti-software kind of early days of Salesforce.com. And I don't know if you use Salesforce or you have used Salesforce these days, but it can be an extremely complex tool. So I'm not sure if their whole mission kind of is the same now as it was in the early days. So do you worry about your software kind of getting too over-engineered and too clunky? And if so, like, how do you deal with that, or how do you monitor that?
Yeah, totally. Like, and it's a big area for me. It's kind of thing that, like, people ask, what keeps you awake at night? That's definitely the thing that I'm always, myself and Des, we're very paranoid about, like, because we can see it as you add more and more customers. Like, when you've 10 or 20 customers at the very start of your business and they're all small, it's easy to have a simple solution for them, and UX can be great, and the usability and intuitive nature. Like, we used to, at the start, to LearnUpon, one of our marketing or sales phrases were that, like, you could be up and running in less than an hour. And in a space where normally, if you were lucky, maybe 3 to 6 months, often 12, 18 months. So this idea that you could be up and running and delivering content in less than an hour was like sort of a utopia or something like that. But it was true as well. We could demonstrate, we could do a sales demo, and by the end of it, the customer would be live. If they gave us the content in advance, we'd have it up and have users in there, have the whole thing running, branded, the whole thing. As we matured as a business over the last 8 years, and we've gone from SMB into mid-market, and we're starting to move into the enterprise space the last 18, 24 months, the product and our engineering development team went from just being Des and Stevo, our first development hire back in the early days, to 80 people in product and engineering today. So the complexity of the product, it's very, very different today. And so, yeah, I would be kind of really conscious of, we don't want to wake up someday and turn into, we're the new cornerstone or Saba, as in that level of complexity and bells and whistles and just really clunky solution that customers don't like. They're powerful, so don't get me wrong, they're definitely very powerful, but they're not a great experience. The user experience is poor. And so we're trying to, as we move up market, our ACV goes up, we're trying to close bigger logos and really get ourselves in a position where we're seen as the leader in the space, the company that any major business, when they're looking for a global LMS, that they look to LearnUpon. We're nowhere near there yet, but that's where we want to get to over the next 4 or 5 years. but we want to do that as we build out the platform, build out those enterprise features. We've invested really heavily in a product and design team. So product has evolved in the early days from being myself and Des speccing the product and this is what we're going to build to, we've people way better than us today in terms of the proper product methodology and approach we take in terms of gathering requirements from our customers, validating them, going through, UX and UI design sessions, right the way through. Like the processes, I'm kind of looking at almost from the outside, looking in at what the product team do now, and it's really, really impressive. And I can see the output, and I can kind of go, okay, we're going about this the right way, I think, and we really are not looking to just churn out features anyway at all to tick boxes, but to actually build an overall platform and solution that scales. It has the power, it has the features, but is actually, built on great UX and a great customer experience.
Some people get that so wrong. Let's stay on that for a minute, right? So let's talk about digital experience or customer experience or CX or whatever you want to call it. And I know that you're a big proponent of the concept and you have a huge focus on your customers. And I happen to know you personally, Brendan. We met a few years ago you were displaying at a conference in Orlando, and the bunch of years ago now at this stage, and it just struck me kind of on the cold face kind of founder CEO has huge enthusiasm for listening to people's feedback on your software, and kind of you were there gathering that firsthand, so good on you for that. So in terms of the CX piece, so, and for our listeners, customer experience in a B2B context, we define as reducing friction throughout the buyer's journey and kind of being easy to buy from, really, and your software being easy to use as well. And in our experience, kind of laggards are focused on incremental improvements to the customer journey, but market leaders really take a blank page approach to designing processes that provide a differentiated experience. They kind of look at it and they say, okay, the full end-to-end kind of journey and touch points, where are the moments that matter here for people on this journey, So I'll give you an example, right? Say you redesign even a simple thing like a website, based, and you look at kind of the journey and the insights, and you get a base group of people to interact with the website, and then you start to observe things, like an anthropologist or something like that, kind of how they're navigating, what they do next, or, where they were. And a lot of technology is designed sometimes with the human in mind, but once people start interacting or touching technology, you discover something new about your own product or something new that customers want. And, with the COVID stuff, it seems like everyone went digital during the lockdown. And I'm wondering, have you spent a lot of time on your digital or mobile experience, or even your online experience, to improve that customer experience? Or maybe it was just brilliant anyway, Brendan, but I mean, can you share with us how you approach the whole kind of customer experience thing?
Yeah, and I think I've always come at it from two sides as well. So you've touched a good bit there, John, on the technology and the product side of customer experience and what actually using your product is like, and like into the UX and all of that kind of areas like accessibility and everything like that is really important. The other part for me, and I think it's just more, is the people side. So as we've moved more digital, I think there is a trend to try and automate a lot of things with chat bots, and there's all sorts of SaaS products and technology out there to make that process really efficient and technology driven. We in LearnUpon, I've always been a fan of, you need to be as efficient in your whole process, that customer journey from prospect right the way through to customer and advocate, etc. You need to be efficient and use technology along the way, but we've been a big fan of the the people side. And we always say, like, what kind of sets LearnUpon apart, it's our platform and our people. They go hand in hand. And so when you sign up for LearnUpon, it's not just a piece of software with like a bunch of features. You also sign up for the team that's behind LearnUpon, and that's everything from your first interaction with one of our BDRs, be it on, intercom on our website, or that first inbound call from a prospect. And we try to add value from that first interaction when our BDR team talk to a prospect, right through to going through to our AEs and like the kind of solution presentation, but more like understanding what our customers are trying to achieve, what does success look for them. And the product is almost like it kind of gets superimposed at the end to some degree when we really understand what it is that our customers are trying to do, or prospects are trying to do. And oftentimes, not often, but sometimes we're not a fit, and we'll be quite selective on that. We'll actually, rather than trying to kind of jam our solution down a prospect's throat and saying like, oh yeah, we can do all that for you. If we know we're not a fit, and particularly in certain industries and use cases, we know we're not, we very quickly qualify out and politely walk away from those opportunities, because we believe that longer term, where to become the market leader of where we want to get to, a big factor in that is going to have good fit, happy, loyal customers who become advocates of LearnUpon. So we put a lot of focus on that, and that's right through to how we train our new hires. Like, they all go on 6 to 8 week boot camps to not just understand the product, but to understand the domain, the industry. So e-learning, all like the nuances that go with LMSs and e-learning content, various standards. It's a very mature and quite complex industry, and we want to make sure that everyone that joins us can actually add value in every conversation. And that goes through to then our support and success teams, which again has been a huge factor in our success to date. But like, we've invested heavily in that. It doesn't come cheap, but we feel it's a differentiator. And whereas a lot of our competitors would look at support and maybe success as a cost center, and how can you kind of get economies of scale, and how can you reduce those costs? We're the opposite. Like, we're investing in this. This is part of what makes LearnUpon different. So I think that's interesting. You combine that with a product where, kind of to your point, we're very data driven. We look at how our customers use the product. We get a lot of data and input from our support teams, our success teams, the actual app usage, and all that feeds into the product teams and how we go about improving and enhancing the platform itself as well.
Very good. I love those feedback loops, but even more the approach to when people join your company to actually educate them on the market is completely aligned with part of my own personal framework that I kind of inculcate into organizations, that I've worked for, because you can't just turn salespeople loose on the street and hope they're going to hit a quota without knowing how to discuss business value and impact and goals in certain markets. So for me, there's so many people making mistakes where they bombard their new recruits with the product. Here's what the product does. Here's the features and benefits, and they completely forget to enable them on kind of what it's like to operate within the market itself. So I completely align with that. I think it's market first, and then it's like kind of where do you operate, or where do your products operate within that particular ecosystem. So what I'd like to ask is, what's the next big main goal for you, Brendan? I know you've raised a substantial amount of money recently to allow you to do many things, and sometimes that can possibly be a curse, because you could do loads of things. You could do loads of things, but what are you going to do really that's important, and how is that going to impact and grow the business and get a return on money? But and to give some context, I founded and grew a software company a number of years ago, and we announced 150 jobs, and after that, one of the board wanted to get to 1,000 employees. Right, that was his thing. Not sure if that's a key driver in a business, but that was his thing. He wanted to grow the company to 1,000 employees. And some founder CEOs want to get to a specific number. I worked for an organization where the CEO had a number, and I never forget the number. It was 93, and I remember we got shirts made up with 93 on the back. For various activities. 93 million was the number that he wanted to get to, but and bizarrely, I think he's the only one that knew that number in the company. But we got this done anyway, and some people are 100 million, right? Especially in a SaaS business, right? It's 50 million, 100 million, right? That's the next big thing. Some people focus on EBITDA numbers. Some people want to smash the 40 rule, or some people want number of customers or number of users or whatever. What's your personally and for the business? What's your next big milestone that you'd like to get to?
I suppose we've looked at it like we've always felt, particularly again back to the space we're in, that it wasn't going to be like we weren't looking for. We've grown very fast, so it's worth mentioning that. But like we're not hyper growth like Zoom or Slack or one of these companies. We've always felt that because it's a mature market, we really needed to build out a great product and establish ourselves. And if we tried to, and we've seen some competitors that started around the same time of us, went out, raised a lot of money very early, went from 100 to 300 people in 12 months, but then to some degree, crashed and burned because you can't hire at that rate and really on board like the values and the culture and all that kind of, well, at least the approach we take to get a really good customer experience if that's your route. So we've to some degree taken a slightly slower route to get to here, but with the raise that we've done recently, we kind of see we're in a position now to actually go and accelerate that. Ultimately, we've always set out we wanted to become the market leader in the space. So I suppose you could argue who that is today. There's players out there like probably Cornerstone, who earlier this year merged with Saba, so two of the biggest players, doing several hundred million in ARR from their LMS business. And probably if you stop someone on the street in the L&D place, they'd be first name off the top of the head. Where we would like to get to position in the next 4 or 5 years where LearnUpon is that kind of seen as the market leader when any business is out looking for an LMS, their first or a new LMS, that we would be top of mind. So we've put a plan in place to get ourselves to that position. So there's definitely ARR targets in there. To get there, we know we're going to have to hire. While it's been an interesting journey, like we'll finish this year at just over 200 people, probably 205, 210. 7 years ago, it was just myself and Des. So it definitely, you kind of look at, wow, that kind of happened quickly. And we know in the next 4 or 5 years, we could well be 600, 800, maybe 1,000 people. That number isn't a major driver for us. We want to hire the best people to deliver that customer experience, to build the best platform and to support it better than anyone else. And so to get to where we want to get to in terms of market positioning, customer numbers, like scale, we know we're going to have to hire to do that. So they're closely linked, but probably the main driver is we want to become the recognized leader in the space. We've set our, like, by 2025, that's what we're working towards. So, and I think if we continue to scale and do what we've done really well to date, back to our earlier point, don't overcomplicate the product as we move more up market, and continue to focus on that great customer experience. I think we'll have a good chance of getting there. We need to do a lot to continue to build our brand. We're very, very US focused. About 70% of our business is in North America, but even with that, like there's still it's sort of tip of the iceberg, that market for us. There's a lot of companies that still don't know us, so we do want to continue to build our reputation so that when people are going for an LMS, all we want to do is if we can make the short list of 4 or 5 vendors that they look at, we're pretty confident we'll win the majority of those deals.
I like it. Situation drives strategy, as they say. And, so how is the current obvious situation driven your strategy at LearnUpon? Are you moving more upstream to enterprise? Are you spending more time with existing customers so that you can unlock additional value for them, or you charge them into new markets, or kind of, like the new market strategy sometimes can be risky, right? Because purchasing attitudes shift, right? Because people view some solutions and products as being extendable or postponable, in downturn times and whatnot, And then, some companies charge forward, etc. So I'm curious, how's the current situation? How's that driving your strategy?
It hasn't changed it too much. We've always been kind of quite clear in what markets we're focused on, both geographically, but also from a use case and, say, customer segment perspective. We know where our solution is very strong. We position ourselves very much as companies who want to train multiple audiences on a single platform. So that multi-audience use case, be it like employee training, customer training, partner training, that's where we're particularly strong. There's segments that we've never really sold into, like, for example, government or higher ed or pharma. And we know we're not the best solution for those areas. So we'll always kind of qualify out of those areas. And even though there's a lot of opportunity there, we try not to get distracted by it and continue to double down and focus on where we know our platform is very strong and that we add a lot of value to our customers. So we're continuing to focus on those kind of segments. We are moving up market. We're seeing, as we get better known and as our platform builds out, that we're becoming a really strong solution for kind of more enterprise companies. Probably, most of our sweet spot today is still mid-market, maybe 500 to 5,000 employee companies. But we're starting to move into 10, 20,000, 50,000 employee companies. I think that will continue to be the case over the next couple of years. And then maybe a couple of years down the line, I think as we continue to scale, we may look at new geographic markets. So like whether that's an EMEA rollout, in a couple of years' time, that's possibly something to look at that point. But for the next kind of 12 to 24 months, I think it's very much continue to focus on the markets we're strong in, invest in the product and slowly kind of continue to move up market.
So Brendan, it goes without saying you have an absolutely exceptional product. I think we talked quite extensively about UI and UX, and I think nailed that. But you mentioned something a little bit earlier that really kind of struck a chord with me, and you mentioned about creating a better mousetrap, etc. But you also said that you invested heavily in marketing in the beginning, and that's something I don't hear very often. I mean, often it's a case, and I've plenty of friends who've started software companies and they've been okay. Some of them been product centric, some of them been services centric, etc. But their assumption was that we need a good sales guy, and as John said earlier, you can't just set a sales guy loose and say, off you go. And the old school approach was very much, if you can picture this, nobody does it anymore, but it's almost like in a virtual sense, put a brochure under their arm and have them go and knock on doors. What really has been missed is that the market is more sophisticated. The buyer is more sophisticated. They're self-educated and self-taught. They're going ahead and they're researching you and what you have to offer ahead of time. And as I worked at HubSpot for many years, and their assertion was that 70% of sale is done ahead of you even having a conversation with a salesperson. And I see that particularly the case in very mature markets in EMEA, like the DACH region, etc. Those guys know what they're doing. And I'm curious to know, like you've obviously got 70% of your business in North America, and that's no accident. But maybe could you share with us a bit of how you've structured sales and marketing to allow sales guys to engage with kind of qualified buyers? And I really loved what you said about qualifying out, because there is no more power than saying no to a customer. We're not a fit for you, because that won't pay off in the long term. But maybe if you could share with us some of your kind of sales and marketing philosophies and how that's led you to kind of generate the demand, as it were, and then scale out ultimately.
Yeah, so like right from the start, we were very focused on content, and that was like even like the first probably year or two, it was me writing a lot of our blog posts. So day one, I kind of set myself a target to write at least one blog post every week, and try to be really disciplined in that. So even if I got to Sunday night at 10 p.m. and I hadn't written a blog post, I wouldn't go to bed until I got that week's post written and published. And I learned a lot there actually from watching the intercom team, and I kind of sort of know Des Trainer. I'd seen him talk a few times, and he had talked, they kind of started a couple of years before us, talked about how they had put a big focus on good quality content. And we were actually, having seen Des talk, that was always at the back of my mind. So we tried to, not write about ourselves too much or write about features and things like that, but actually write high value content that somebody would, if they read it and they were in the space, they'd learn from it. It'd be educational. They'd value it, and hopefully they'd share it around. So we focused very much on that. And then when it came to actually myself and Des like making hires, our first hire was in customer support, which ties back to our focus there. And we hired Shane 7 years ago now. And that was important. It allowed me to focus more on selling. So I was doing all our early sales, and Des to focus on product development. And our second hire was Caroline in marketing. So again, it tied into, I always felt, okay, we need to build a content engine here as best we can. And we also did paid channels, and we experimented with those. We didn't have very much money in the early days. So it was like, if we're going to spend, €1,000 on Google Ads, I wanted to see leads coming through. I wanted to be able to turn them into demos, and I wanted to turn those into paying customers before going to pay again, going to spend more on that channel. So we did a lot of that in the early days, experimented with different channels. If we saw something working, we just recycled the revenue we were getting in very quickly, double down on that channel and go again. So we combined those paid channels with, it took a while to build up, but the organic traffic from writing really good content. And today we've quite a big content team led by Caroline, but we're continue that approach of producing really high value content, and our blog gets over 100,000 visitors a month. So over very slowly over 8 years, that's what it's scaled up to. And then that traffic, obviously, a certain proportion of it would come through and look for demos of our product, and then we had a pretty good sales process from there, which evolved over time as well. We learned how to segment it in the early days. When I did hire first couple of account executives in the team, when I wasn't able to keep up with the opportunities, it was like, okay, now we need to actually hire some salespeople. But we were largely inbound, 90% inbound through that marketing engine.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's a refreshing message to hear, and it's definitely a continuing trend, I suppose, that we're seeing. And you came from a very content-centric kind of universe. You mentioned about everyone has something that keeps them up at night, but I'm curious to know what excites you and gets you up in the morning.
I guess the progress we're making and what we're doing. Like my role has evolved a lot over the years. Like obviously in the early days of a startup, you're doing everything, a lot of things yourself, from doing the sales demos, writing the content, sending out the invoices, hopefully if you're lucky, doing the management accounts. And as we scaled up to, like I was saying, nearly 200 people now, for me, it's like, okay, my direct role has changed a lot. And what I enjoy is actually looking at the team that we're putting together, looking at the hires we're making across the business for the next phase of the journey, and getting to know those people and learn from them and watch them come in and bring a lot of experience and playbooks as we look to scale up the business, so to become a best-in-class SaaS business. So we've made really great hires from leading companies like Qualtrics and Pluralsight and Lucid Charts and different companies like that. And so we've been blending that with our kind of early LearnUpon team, who thankfully the vast majority are still with us, and have come through that journey from being a small 5-10 person startup to where we're going today, and continuing to go on that journey. So there's a great buzz in that. I mean, it's still a roller coaster. You still have ups and downs, days where things go really well, days where you might miss out on a deal you thought you were going to win. So that never goes away. And so that excitement of, okay, what are we going to be doing today is definitely gets me up in the morning. And it's, overall, it's just really enjoyable, like watching how things have evolved and the team we have. And we saw a lot of it actually with our investment with Summit. Like kind of the due diligence for a raise of that size is really detailed. And some of it is like, I actually get to see the level of detail of what we're doing across our different teams. And I found that, like, wow, this is impressive, because you're a bit more removed of it as the company gets bigger. So, so that's kind of it. It's kind of just the journey that we're on, and trying to see where I can help provide guidance and some input where I can. And other than that, I try to stay out of the way and let the teams execute, and they've been doing a great job on that.
So Brendan, we always like to ask people what their superpower is, and anyone who's listened to the show before, we kind of contextualize it around 4 areas, So some founder CEOs, such as yourself, are very strong at product. They live and breathe kind of solving problems for people and markets, and they a lot of the time are very strong engineering backgrounds and kind of product development backgrounds, or it could be culture as well. Some people are great at attracting talent. They just great with people and bringing in talent and giving them relative autonomy to do the job, etc. Or the other 2 buckets are the whole business model, deal management, all of that kind of metrics, sales and marketing type piece, or there's the operational piece. Some people are just incredibly good at establishing and optimizing processes, for effectiveness and efficiency in the organization. So where's and only one really, right? Brendan, you probably have them all, but we tell us, what you feel your superpower is, or has that evolved over time, or kind of what would you see as your superpower?
Yeah, I think definitely in the early days of LearnUpon, and even prior to LearnUpon, the product one is probably where I'd fit. Like I've always been passionate about like trying to build great products that people will use and get value from, and understanding like customers' pain points and frustrations, and being able to map that to a solution. I'm not a developer or a coder. That's where Des brought the magic, but I definitely was always good at understanding what a good software platform could look like, and that's why myself and Des worked very. My early days, like even my KPMG days, I started my career as a business analyst, so like I had a good experience there, and up until probably recently, like I would have been still heavily involved in the product for LearnUpon, the vision, where we're building out. We hired a new head of product a little over a year ago, and we've scaled out our product team significantly, and I've seen my role from that regard has definitely changed. I provide input to the overall vision, but I would probably see myself today spend a lot of my time on the people and culture side of things, which is something that's very passionate for myself and for Des. So, obviously we want to build a business that does great revenues and, has lots of great customers and all of that kind of thing. But the other big thing for us is we wanted to build a company where people would like to come to work, enjoy working, would get to develop themselves, learn new things, get responsibility that they mightn't get in other companies. And so both of us have always been driven by that LearnUpon shouldn't just be a job, but actually something that people look forward to do. And I'd say most of my time today goes around building out that team, trying to maintain that culture, hiring in the people that can help us on the next phase of the journey. Like we're, very proud. We're we're headquartered in Ireland. We've a great team in Belgrade, team in Philadelphia, some in Arizona and in Sydney. So we see ourselves very much as a global company, and to be able to blend those cultures into like making LearnUpon a great place to work and to execute at the level that we do. I think that takes a lot of focus from myself and from Des and the other leaders in the business. So I know I'm only meant to pick one, John, but I think it's changed a little bit.
Well, listen, as I know, Brendan, you're a very formidable character, and lots of people, and our listeners included, can learn a lot from this podcast. But obviously, you can teach an awful lot to the people in your own organization, because I mean, hat tip to you. There is I can count on one hand, the people that I know that are as hard working as you, Brendan. So absolute hat tip to you in that regard. And that's kind of, for me, that's leadership at its best. So just quickly, the future, right? So in terms of learning, I'm curious. Are people more interested now in learning tools? Is the overall space kind of getting more and more traction? And I say this because my own experience, let's just say, even going back even as close as 5 years ago, in order to convince the big table that enablement and learning is extremely important in an organization was quite the task. And I think there's been a bit of a shift now. I don't know, you're the expert, so I'm wondering kind of what role does AI or machine learning play in the future, do you think, of learning and, kind of immersive kind of learning? And what kind of trends are you seeing? Or like, where's the future at for learning for organizations?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, and I guess some of it's driven probably off the back of COVID as well, being maybe accelerated a little bit in the last 12 to 18 months, just the focus that it's getting within organizations. Certainly, like we've seen this year, as companies went remote with their teams, suddenly the importance of learning across a remote workforce is really heightened, particularly if your business is growing, hopefully, and you're hiring and onboarding new people. We've seen it ourselves this year. We've hired probably 80 people since March, and all interviewed remotely, all onboarded remotely, assimilated into their teams, and producing. But a big part of that is, okay, how do you onboard and upskill and train these people so that they know how to do their job? And I think maybe in the past, if people had a learning platform and it wasn't great, the experience wasn't great, but it sort of did the job, companies would have settled with it. I think now the importance of learning is like, actually, our LMS or learning platform needs to be best in class. We can't expect our users or employees to kind of have this really bad experience where they can't find the content that they're looking for, they don't know how to log in or whatever it is. Whereas you might have put up with those frustrations in the past, I think that's no longer acceptable. And that creates a great opportunity for companies like LearnUpon, who are trying to bring that better experience to the table. So we've definitely seen that. I think there's definitely trends where making the knowledge that people need to do their jobs, like we now kind of see it like a lot of what people have available to companies to kind of grow. It's very the same opportunities are there for everyone. So how are you going to win? Well, probably the one area is if your team have more knowledge, are better skilled and better trained up. And so we see it as a competitive advantage that, platform like LearnUpon can help enable from that perspective. We're looking at some of the new technologies like AI and ML. I think some of that is I think it just makes the whole process more efficient, and it can help learners get the right content of what they need to do their job when they need it more efficiently. So we see things like that, like recommendation engines, and playing a role and getting really sophisticated, like obviously by their nature, learning as they go, and they can have a big impact that, like, if a learner needs to find something out in a certain area to do their job, that rather than that being a big ordeal of maybe having to go to their manager and talk, and has anyone built this course, has anyone done it, all of that can be streamlined and just be made much more efficient. So we see really interesting opportunities there. And also from an L&D and admin perspective, just to make L&D professionals more efficient in their time and what they spend their time on. I think there's interesting opportunities around how content gets created and the role that AI and ML can play in that as well, which is definitely I think an interesting area that we think will come more to the fore in the next couple of years.
So Brendan, thank you for sharing. And I suppose as we wrap up, and as an Irish company and an Irish CEO and co-founder, we've obviously got an incredibly good name as a nation in the world. And, a lot of Irish people in America, or a lot of Irish Americans claim Irish roots and such. But I'm curious to know, we often talk about this when we have Irish guests on, about the crack, and just to clarify for some of our non-Irish listeners, that's spelled CRAIC, and it's not the narcotic variety, as I always say. But I'm curious to know, like, how do you define the crack, number one, and then how do you, I suppose, define and execute on a global culture with such a huge reach that you guys have nowadays?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Ross. Like, for me, I kind of often describe it, particularly when I'm maybe talking to, candidates that we're going through, maybe I chat through the interview process and they want to know, like, well, what's it like to work and LearnUpon? And I've always kind of taken it back to even myself and Des's friendship at the start, and as we built the team out over the years. Like, we were very focused on, like, basically we wanted the skills and talent that our team would bring, but that they would also be good fun and have the crack and fit into the company. And that's, I think, as a founder, like, there's in an early stage startup, there's lots of things you can't control, but the one thing you can control is who you hire. And so we've been very focused on that. And I often describe it as people that, like, we take the business and our customers very seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. And that, for me, is it. Like, I think for myself and Des and anyone in the team, we don't tolerate egos, or, as we say in Ireland, people who have notions about themselves. You won't get very far in LearnUpon with that kind of attitude. We're all willing to get our hands dirty, whatever the job is that needs to be done. We roll up our sleeve and do it. It's not like the attitude of, like, that's not my job or whatever. So I think if you combine that with, doing a great job for our customers, building a great product, and then being able to go out and have fun, and it is really important. And then on the global scale, yeah, like, I think we're lucky. When we started LearnUpon, Des was based in Belgrade in Serbia. His wife is Serbian. So when myself and Des started the business, we started as a remote business. I was in Dublin at the time and he was in Belgrade. And so when it came to building out our team and being able to hire our first couple of people, I hired, as I said, support and marketing and sales in Dublin, and Des hired the engineering team in Belgrade. But even those early days, we didn't have much money. We used to twice a year bring the Belgrade, the Serbian team, over to Dublin in the summer and again at Christmas. And throughout the year, we'd send members of the Dublin team over. And it just created that rapport and camaraderie that you want in a business. So even though we were thousands of miles apart, we always felt, because you can do a lot over, obviously, Slack and Zoom and various tools to collaborate, but it's still, there's nothing quite like being able to meet up with your colleagues from another country and go out for dinner, go for pints, do treasure hunts, or whatever sort of events you organize. And when we were a 5-10 person company, we used to do those kind of things. And when we opened up made our first hires in Philadelphia, that was 2016, about 3 or 4 years ago, it was the same thing. We tried to bring the US team over to Dublin, once or twice a year, and we'd regularly go over. And so obviously things are a bit different this year, but we're looking forward to getting back to that. I think it has a huge impact. Actually, when we hit a big milestone October last year that we've been kind of working towards for a couple of years, and we brought pretty much the whole company. I think we had just over 100 people at the time, and we brought 96 to Berlin in Germany for a weekend away, and that was an amazing experience. It was like definitely one of those, as a founder, stand back moments. I think at one point we pretty much had a restaurant booked out to ourselves with almost 100 people in it, and myself and Des were standing in the corner kind of just looking, going like, wow, like this is what we've got to. And that's kind of it's quite a humbling experience, I think, to see that. And just to see all the interaction. We had our team from Australia over from Sydney. We had people from Canada, the US, Belgrade, Dublin, the UK, and it all together for a couple of days, which was really cool, and sort of like kind of set our stall out of, okay, we got to that milestone, here's what we're going to do in the next 4 or 5 years, and really helps, I think, everyone buys into that vision. And then when you're working on those tough days and people are, you have challenges you're dealing with, you're looking for help from your colleagues in another office or another department, I think that strong team bond really shines through in those scenarios.
Wow, that's awesome. Very comprehensive answer, and very much sets the tone for team building. I can only imagine you standing in the restaurant in the corner there, looking back on your achievements. And I feel like with the pandemic at the moment, going out for pints is something I'm going to tell my kids about. This is what I used to do. This is what our generation did, and hopefully we'll be able to go back to that. I'm having a birthday with a 0 on the end of it in early December, and I'm crossing all my fingers that in fact I'll be able to go and actually celebrate it with my wife, but the jury's still out on that one. Well, look, Brendan, I can't thank you enough for being our guest today. I think our audience will get a ton of value from what you've said. You really set the tone in terms of leadership, product development, sales and marketing, and I think there's an awful lot to take away from this. I'm sure John will echo my sentiments, since I was certainly taking notes, but thank you again for your contribution.
No problem at all, Ross. Thanks for the opportunity. Great to chat to you and John. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Brendan. Yeah, wonderful insights.
You've been listening to the Global Tech Leaders Podcast, designed for both established and aspiring career-focused tech rock stars, as well as helping leadership figure out how to speak global in today's multicultural world. For further details, check out sf-talent.com.